My name is Jennifer Frost, and I coordinate Disability Support Services here at John A. Logan College. For Disability Support Services, everybody should receive a handbook that goes through, and it'll actually talk about the legal mandates that of why we provide accommodations to students. It goes through and discusses information on dealing with different types of disabilities in your classroom, and also has the student grievance policy and procedures in there. You can refer to it, or if you ever have any questions, you can contact me. At the college last year, we served 187 students, non-duplicated over the course of the year. Of our student population, the majority of students that receive accommodations are learning disability students. That's usually around 50% of our students. We do also, probably the second highest group would be ADHD-related disabilities, and that's probably around 20% of our students. So the majority of our students fall under those two categories. We also serve deaf and hard of hearing students, students with mobility issues, physical health, emotional health, psychological disabilities.
So what would be the process of a student coming in to receive services?
If a student is interested in receiving services, what they need to do is they actually come into our office and identify themselves. They'll provide documentation, and we have very specific guidelines as far as documentation of what we require from a student. We require that it has a clear diagnosis, that it gives the limitations of how that disability affects them as a student, and that the medical professional makes the appropriate recommendations. Once a student is approved for services, they actually must come in every semester and request their services. So a student is responsible for coming every semester and letting us know that they would like to use services. One of the biggest things that we try to stress to a student, and we try to make sure, is that students respect their need for privacy, that we try to keep information confidential, that a student's not singled out in the classroom at any point for a service, not singled out in receiving services. We try to keep things confidential. The other thing I like to stress to students is that they're their own advocate. They're actually in charge of their services and how they work. So they're the ones that actually make the arrangements with the instructor. They're the ones that are going to come to the instructor with their letters and talk about how they want to use those services in that classroom.
So what would be some of the typical types of accommodations that a student might receive?
The two most common accommodations that we see out of our office are extended test time. Extended test time means double time. That is John A. Logan College's policy. So if it's a 15-minute class and a student is given the entire class period for a test, they'd be given an hour and 40 minutes. They can use that any type of test, any type of quiz. It's not for homework, it's not for papers, it's not for anything like that. Typically for extended test time, a student will take the exam in the learning lab, and the instructor would drop off the exam in the learning lab, and the student would take it there, and the student and the instructor would make the arrangements as to day and time. Second most common accommodation is note-taking. For note-taking, what we do is we send out a packet in the mail. It's a folder, and it'll have in it an application, and what we ask instructors to do is to try to help recruit a volunteer from the class to be the note-taker. We will actually pay a note-taker at the end of the semester $40, so it is a stipend that a student can receive. We ask that they have legible handwriting and that they have good attendance. If an instructor is unable to get a note-taker from a class, if they'll let us know, we can try to post it with job placements to make sure that we're doing everything to ensure that student gets a note-taker in the classroom.
Okay, and the exams of extended time would be taking in the learning lab?
Typically in the learning lab, yeah. And that's up to you and the student to make those arrangements and on what works best for that classroom and that classroom environment. So.
Okay, and then do you provide alternative types of materials for students?
Yes, we do. The other two kind of categories as far as services is we do provide alternate formats. We do provide students with books on tape if they're eligible to receive them. That is something that's provided through our office, so the student would actually coordinate that with our office to receive books on tape. Actually, it's books on CD anymore, but we do provide those for students. Students can also receive enlarged textbooks, and that is something they also coordinate through our office, that we will arrange to get them enlarged textbooks. If a student is receiving enlarged handouts or enlarged tests, that is something that, as an instructor, when you take your test down to word processing, you can ask for one enlarged copy for that particular student. We also have test proctoring, and that kind of covers a couple different areas that we coordinate in our office. We provide test readers for students who need that service. We provide a test scribe for students that needs that, and we also have what we call a quiet testing room. Those are all three done in our office. We ask a student at that point that they give us at least 2 full days notice. So at that point, the student is responsible for coordinating with our office to make sure that time is available for them. With a test reader, what we have is we have a software program called the Kurzweil, where we scan the exam into a computer and it'll read the exam to the student. For a test scribe, typically more common for a student with physical mobility issues where if it's Scantron or something like that, then we can actually code over the information into the Scantron for a student. And we also have a quiet testing room for students where they're in an office by themselves, so there are no other distractions around them. So.
Okay. Is there any other services you provide that we haven't discussed?
We do have students that come through our office that are requesting sometimes different physical accommodations for the classroom. When a student comes in to do that, what we do is we send a memo through maintenance and make sure that that's handled. So as an instructor, if you do have a student that comes to you and has a physical, needs a table and chair, needs that kind of thing for the classroom, you can send them down to our office and we'll get a memo through maintenance to make sure that gets taken care of.